Good afternoon. It's a really miserable day here in Berwickshire. My name's Christina Jansen. I am the Scottish Gallery, and this is our very exciting last Meet the Artist by Zoom. So we've got Angie Lewin and Emily Sutton here. Emily is currently, you're in Speyside, and Emily is just outside Yorkshire. I'm not going to give you your secret location away, Emily.
I'm in Yorkshire.
Yeah. So we have two wonderful artists that are associated with the Scottish Gallery. They both have lots of things in common, and they both have lots of things that make them unique in who they are. And it's lovely to have them together, because I would say that you're both friends with one another. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
And Emily had her People and Places exhibition very recently in the gallery, and she also designed the Modern Masters events program, which has been really popular. I hope we've sung your praises enough. It was just so lovely for you to do that. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. So both artists are you make books in different ways. Emily is a known book illustrator, and I think you might be an author soon. And so there's some of Emily's, and previously that was Angie's. And then the next slide, you're both printmakers, so that's very different examples. That's Emily's alphabet series on the right, and that's, well, you can tell me what they both are. Should we start with you, Angie?
Yes, actually, this is a watercolour that I'm doing on the left-hand side, which I think was for probably a show I did with you. It's either 2015 or 2018, I think. Yeah, so that's a watercolour I'm working on quite a large scale.
I'm sorry, I was doing this so quickly. I was going, and we had lots of lovely. I'm so sorry. That is very stupid of me.
But no, it doesn't look dissimilar to how I do my films, because I'll have like the drawing underneath, and then it's almost like I'm working on the black film. But unfortunately, that isn't what it is. But the principle's the same.
And Emily, that's not your latest one that you've been working on, is it?
No, I'm actually up to T now, which is extremely exciting. So it's been just over 10 years, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through, which is very, very proud of how fast I'm getting through these.
Amazing. Well, we'll come back to the whole kind of we'll come back to all of the printmaking techniques, because that all feeds into composition and so on. Lisa, if you can just go on to the next slide, please. So I have a series of slides featuring Angie Lewin. I was telling Angie, I've done this in alphabetical order. So there's Angie in her Edinburgh studio, and there is Angie, the real Angie, sitting there in Speyside. There's lots and lots of visual information there. There's lots of visual information behind you. And I need to say to all of you, if you want to ask questions, please keep them coming. I'll name call you, and I will ask the questions to both Angie and Emily, because that's the whole point of meeting the artist. You're here, you can meet the artist, you can ask them questions. If you also only want to focus on the artist, you can go to the right. If you go up to the right hand screen of either Angie or Emily, you can make them the main focus, and that's all you have to see. But we will be rattling through these. I love your house in Edinburgh. It's so lovely, and I have got a whole series of photographs of you in the garden, which I'm going to use in your forthcoming exhibition, because they are part of your palette, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the garden in Edinburgh, although it's not very big, I've kind of planted it up in a way that reflects the kind of plant that I like to paint and draw. And also, if you can remember, there's the woodland to one side of it. So I've sort of tried to sort of extend the woodland into my garden by the things that I plant. So I get a lot of inspiration from that garden. And it's a really, it's a great contrast to up here on Speyside, where it's much wilder. It's not so much gardening as damage limitation really on Speyside, I suppose. But yeah, and then the house, I'm always bringing things into the house from the garden, like seed heads or things from Speyside end up in Edinburgh as well. So everything's quite fluid. Things move between the two, really. There's lots of sort of things to include in my work.
How long have you been in Edinburgh now?
8 years.
And
yeah.
And here's one of the examples from Modern Masters Women. I know you have a huge repertoire. So this is a lino cut. I was very specific in the choice for Modern Masters Women. I wanted something coordinated. So this wasn't necessarily an expensive example of your work. I just loved it. It sits really nicely with the next image. And because I have shown a watercolor, perhaps if you can just go back to that other one, Lisa, and if we can let Angie, who did train originally as in printmaking at Central St Martin's, if you can just give us a tiny little explanation of your lino cut.
Yeah, well, this is quite an unusual lino cut for me, that it's only 2 colours, but it was based, interesting, on another artist at the Scottish Gallery show, which is Mark Hurl, did an exhibition at York City Art Gallery, and I've now forgotten the name of it. Emily might remember the name of it.
The Lumber Room.
The Lumber Room. And basically different artists were asked to choose things in that exhibition, and I chose a jug which had an image of a sheaf of wheat on it, and I created this image also with a kind of secondary idea that one day I might create a repeat pattern from it. So there's that sort of simplicity, this idea that it'll become potentially an end paper or a fabric. So just working in 2 colours, which is something that I really enjoy, that link with design and printmaking, where you're kind of limiting your palette and trying to work out, although of course you design a painting, compose a painting, somehow with printmaking it's almost even more to the fore when I'm kind of working out composition and ideas.
So I've got a great question from Liz for both of you right now, which is, Angie and Emily are both known for their beautiful paintings and printmaking, but do you ever use modern technology when preparing the work? I'm thinking of drawing tablets, iPads, or even photography to gather information. So I think that's a great question for both of you. Who wants to answer first?
Sure. Yeah. For me, photography, but that's it. Yeah, I'm really bad at technology because I'm quite lazy, and I'm not lazy, but I'm lazy when it comes to technology. So I haven't made any effort to learn all the like snazzy programs that I'm sure would make my life a lot easier. But no, I'm very, very low tech. I don't think I'm doing anything differently from how artists were doing it probably the middle of last century when it comes to my techniques in printmaking. But yeah, I'm not necessarily proud of that, but that is what it is.
Well, we've got some examples of your plates that you did for your invitation later on, so we can come back to that. I mean, I love all your hand setting. It's just a joy. Angie, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'd say I was exactly the same. I do take photographs of things. I sketch when I'm out, but I'll also take photographs of plants or landscape just to add extra information. But I think I'm probably worse than Em, actually. I have absolutely no skills whatsoever on the computer. I mean, if I'm designing a fabric, then I'll do a lino cut, and then my husband Simon, who I run St Jude's with, he will then scan it in, and he'll do things like that are required to turn it into the product that it's going to be. But in terms of my own work, it's the same as Em. I draw films, hand draw films, I hand cut blocks, and I draw everything direct. So yeah, I'm a complete Luddite, really, I'm afraid. And actually, again, I'm not proud of it. I mean, it's the skills that are useful actually to have alongside the sort of manual skills that we have.
Yeah, I think you're putting yourself down. I mean, it's so complex, printmaking, and I think for both of you, I think it really enhances your unique, one-off works. I mean, this watercolor here, that you've just gone by, Lisa. If you can just go back to that, sorry. I read it that it relates to your printmaking, but it's such a beautiful watercolor. But I think you've just got such a backlog of skills. I wish I should have included a photograph of this in the frame, because it's really beautiful in the frame, and I love the white space around it. But I just feel that all the information from you being a printmaker goes within this painting.
Yeah, I think there are more links between the two than I thought that there were actually initially. I think that there is quite a strong crossover. And I think with Emily as well, the way that you work, the way as a printmaker, I think the crossover between illustrator, designer, printmaker, they really feed into each other. I think the skills you need as a printmaker help enormously as a designer. I mean, I don't know if you feel that way when you're...
I do, yeah, definitely. Like the use of colour, I think, layering up colours. I think doing printmaking really helped me with that, because I wasn't naturally a confident colorist, but I think when you're working in layers where you're sort of deciding the colors after doing the drawing, it kind of gives you a bit more ability to experiment. And then when you come to do a watercolor, which obviously is, you've got much less room for you know, changing your mind, it kind of, you then you can draw upon some of that confidence that you've been learning in the printmaking. So yeah.
And both of you have made fabrics for St. Jude's as well, and I'm pretty sure you were doing prints before you did fabric design. Did you say that's correct? Is that right?
Well, yeah, in my case, well, both of us, yeah, definitely, yeah. And
I'm just answering a question from Karen. Angie does make fabrics, and you can get them on St. Jude's. That's the main tag for that. And there's a question for both of you about the technology aspect. Do the publishers require you to scan your images and send them digitally? And I know that the answer to that is yes. Or is it?
For me, no. Actually, I send them photos just so we all know what we're dealing with. But they usually send them off to be scanned in China or sometimes in Europe, but yeah, they scan it very high res. So luckily, I don't need to do that. I don't know about Angie, but no, I'm very much.
Well, I don't do as much illustration, but I think it's a mixture actually. I think sometimes they prefer to scan the work themselves, don't they? Because they can be more sure of the quality that they need. There's a bit of a mixture, yeah.
Both of you have a shared passion for objects and the natural world, which are brought together. I know that we will be able to see some of the collections that Emily has later on, but I know that in this example and in the previous example, you do find things on walks and so on, don't you, Angie? And then you also have a really nice ceramic collection.
Yeah, I do. I collect. I mean, I'm a complete hoarder in that I'll have sort of pieces of seaweed or driftwood in my studio that I've had since about 1993. And I just sort of hold on to them because somehow when I've selected those, they've meant something to me at the time and remind me of specific places. But yeah, I have a huge collection of natural finds and things like that. And then the ceramics, they just sort of have grown over the years and years. And then a lot of them are quite chipped or damaged, so I'm not buying expensive things. It's just things that I feel I like the imagery on them that I can then incorporate into watercolors or prints.
And this one,
almost find them with that intent.
And this one's very clever because it's a still life, and you've got the landscape behind there. Now you know that landscape, and it's just outside your window.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting.
Yeah. So that's.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the sort of snowy landscape just as I'm sitting here, just to my right-hand side, which is sort of a little glen that runs along the side of and off into the hills. And that features a lot in my work, not in great detail, but just almost like intimating that it's there. It's often quite simplified, and I'm focusing much more on the foreground in the way that I do when I'm looking at sort of plants in the landscape.
And I've got a very good question from Lucia, which is a very important question not to forget, which is the reliance on sketchbooks and drawing every day. So I know that you will both have a different method of doing that. I know that Emily works very heavily from sketchbooks, but can you both talk about collecting images and observing things, and then how that feeds into finished work?
Should I go first?
Yeah, Emily.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I have two different kinds of sketchbooks. I have the ones that are purely sort of observational, and they tend to be the ones that I'll take with me when I go on a holiday or a trip somewhere to draw. And they're very much about, yeah, as I say, they're observational. It's ideas for paintings or just studies of things or just little sketches of details. And then I've got my sort of illustration working sketchbooks, which are very much about scribbling down ideas or working through an idea for a brief, you know, a specific project. And I also kind of combine those with my book sketchbooks. So like little studies for books. I'm working on a new book at the moment that's about giraffes in Africa. So I'm experimenting with some new like chalky pastels and mixed media, and so I do all my practice kind of scribbles in there. But yeah, I wouldn't say religiously every day, but definitely if I go for more than a few days, then I immediately lose all confidence I can ever work again. So yeah, I think it's quite important to maintain that, you know, fairly much, pretty much every day, but yeah, not too strict, otherwise you start to get burnt out. But yeah.
What about your sketchbooks, Angie?
Well, mine are partly because I don't have books in the same way that Emily works on long-term projects on books and series of projects, things like that. So I tend to have my sketchbooks have everything in them, whether it's a design for fabric or it's just a sketch when I'm out walking, because actually everything comes from that. So my work is very much tied in with the plants that I see and the landscapes that I'm in, and so any commissions that I get very much relate to that. It's all to do with my observation of plants and landscape. It's narrower, I suppose, but I tend to have a very big sketchbook and then a very small sketchbook are the two main things that I have. So the little one's with me a lot, and then the bigger sketchbook would go out on like a short walk, but I wouldn't lug that all the way up, you know, into Glenlivet. I'd just take the little sketchbook, and the big one's almost a mixture of sketchbook and scrapbook.
Yeah, I was just about.
Also, I glue things at different points, so there can be things from years ago that I suddenly find, and then I'll stick that into the sketchbook, so that they're not even particularly chronological. Overall, they are, but there can be sort of, you know, wild cards thrown in here and there.
I mean, your garden's a sketchbook. Sorry, it's just as you were saying that, and Lisa's brought those images up. We saw two examples of your exhibition in the gallery from 5 years ago, and it's amazing how the work has moved on. That was just to allow the audience a glimpse into the scale of some of your work as well. And there's some of your fabric in the background. I mean, it's a really harmonious. It's a lovely room but we'll talk about what's going to happen shortly. If we go to the images of Speyside, Lisa, because that is currently where you are. So that is some of the landscapes that's feeding into the background of your current work, which I find is really interesting.
Yeah. So the right-hand image is Ben Rinnis, which you can see from, well, that's the view basically from the cottage and from the studio. And that was probably, I think that was just a few days ago actually, when the cloud was just sort of coming up. Yeah, it's very early in the morning and the clouds just disappear and you can start to see the Ben Rinnis again, and then the river's not far away. So yeah, it's a really, really beautiful landscape around here. It's not as dramatic as the West Coast, it's not, you know, as stunning, but it's absolutely, you know, it's just a beautiful, beautiful rolling wild landscape. So, and very different obviously to the little garden that we have in Edinburgh, but close to the house we do plant to make it seem more kind of inhabited and give it some sense of almost being almost cozier somehow. But I love this sort of the big wide expansive views from it. And the left-hand image there, that's the Edinburgh garden.
And that
was during lockdown.
Oh, amazing. Well, I've got amazing pictures. Not as good as that. I've got some pictures of those poppies, which I know that you got in Waitrose. And
there are no poppies like that around here.
Has Emily been up to Speyside yet? I know that Emily's been to your studio in Edinburgh.
Oh yes, you've been up.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've been, I think, twice.
Yeah.
I think twice. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to discuss the people and the places that you've been looking at recently, Emily, as well. Should we just move on? So look at that. That is hot off the shelf. That is a hot preview. That is the front cover of Angie Lewin's forthcoming Nature Assembled. I cannot wait to see this. This is just an amazing body of work, and Angie is dominating the whole of the upstairs of the gallery, which if anyone's been to the Scottish Gallery, we're on 2 floors. So the images before were the lovely garden room, which is really intimate, and it's nice that it sits with our garden. But upstairs, it can be intimidating, but you have absolutely smashed it. We can't wait for this. It's so glorious. I think the lockdown has been a pretty positive time for you. I know that you've developed all kinds of new relationships with flowers and plants, your auriculas in particular.
Yes, that's it. I mean, we were in Edinburgh for lockdown, and so I think we left Speyside on a Friday, thinking we'd be back on the Monday afternoon, and didn't come back for 14 weeks. So, which is a bit of a shock, actually. But it meant that I did absolutely focus on that garden, and the auriculas, which I've wanted to concentrate on for a long time. They were flowering at the start of lockdown, so I was just able to really produce I can't remember how many I produced in the end, but I produced a lot of sketches, but probably 5 or 6 paintings of them. So it was very positive. I mean, the initial reaction, I don't know how Em felt when lockdown happened. The initial situation, very obviously, as it was a very strange and worrying situation, was unsettling and difficult. But then actually I found that place to be, the garden to be a total haven, as many people found their gardens to be havens, and focused in possibly even more than normal, because the space is so much smaller than the expansive landscape here.
Absolutely. And I know that Emily, I felt that I was speaking to you every day of the lockdown, because it just happened to coincide that you had a show coming up, and you were extraordinary. Everyone had such different situations, and I know that I think you just gave it 100% focus, Emily, and you didn't let it distract you, although it must have been a distraction at the same time. I know that you probably don't want to look at yourself, so we'll move on to the next image. I love these images. These are my favorite images. I just love looking in people's studios. Artist studios are just my favorite place. I love the palette of all of this. It just gives you such an insight. Is your studio this?
Yeah. Well, actually, this is my sort of temporary studio. I don't actually have a permanent studio anywhere, because my new house, I need to build a studio. Well, not build it, but convert my attic into a studio, which I haven't managed to do yet. But this is my old, this is my room at my parents' house, where I've been out in the countryside, and luckily I've had a room that I've been able to come and use, so it wasn't completely new. It had a bunch of stuff in it already, and thank goodness I managed to go to I'd managed to go to Paris the end of last year, so I had a sketchbook full already of material for paintings, and then once I'd sort of developed all the ones that I wanted to, I moved on to still lives, and that was kind of what got me through lockdown. It's just sort of just focusing on that and kind of not thinking about the world at large too much.
You've been amazing. You designed your invitation card. You gave new work, because we had no idea how your exhibition was going to be received in June. I mean, it was right slap bang in the middle of the darkest aspect of the lockdown, and it was just an extraordinary response to it, which it was so well deserved. But we we hadn't planned for that because we didn't know. We still don't know how things are going to be. And these were works that you did for Modern Masters Women at very short notice. I asked you in April, and I'm so fortunate to have got new work from both of you. Again, this is a lovely, honest reflection of things that are in your studio, seasonal flowers, your ceramic collection. Lisa, if we just move on, I love all the things in your house.
Yeah,
and so they're really real. I mean, I know that when I see your work, it really is. These are all real things that mean something to you in your house. I guess it's your little play world.
Yeah. Well, I've got a red cabinet which was in my studio at my old house, and it's now in my front room in my new house, and I really need to reorganize it. It's gotten a bit over full. I need to get maybe a second cabinet, but yeah, it's full of stuff that I've been collecting over the past, I don't know, 10, 12 years. And yeah, from all over the world really. But yeah, lots of old tins and toys and other kind of bits of packaging that are inspiring, lots of good lettering and Victorian bits and pieces.
Which we can, and so these are two screen prints.
Yeah.
Again, they're not the most, expensive examples of your work, but I did want to have, for a mixed exhibition, it's very, very difficult, and it was about coordination, and so it's really lovely, the relationship that I see between the objects and the honest relationship between the printmaking and also compositional picture making in watercolor. And so we're just trying to let everyone see the objects come together in both places.
Those little prints they were inspired by I think I did those after I'd gotten back from a holiday in France, and I'd been looking at a lot of those old French school charts, and just the process of printmaking and the kind of the quite limited colours, and so I came back and did those. I feel like to me they look quite French. I don't know if they did to anybody else, but yeah, that was where that came from.
And then again, we've got some other images that just give us some insight into the way that you work. And then if we go on to where are they, and then these things all relate to one another.
That tin was from an antique shop in Simi Valley in California, which is near where my uncle lives. So I need to do the other side. It's got a really good other side of the tin, but I had to choose, so that was the one I went for. But yeah, I really am starting to explore more mark making and kind of a bit more of a freer style. I think I was starting to get into that. The nice thing about doing a body of work and a series of still lives is you sort of start to experiment a little bit. So, and that's something that is now feeding into my illustration work as well. So it's kind of interesting how it all gradually develops and changes. Yeah.
And here's some old school drawings and desigin for your.
This is maybe at my most high tech right here.
We love your high tech. I mean, for both of you, it's just hand drawing and so on. It's just such a pleasure. I mean, we do all use technology to then translate these. If you just move on, Lisa, because that then becomes this. And if we go on to, this was an A5 invitation, which I would love to do a publication for Emily, which hopefully we'll do in the future. Angie's has been a joy, which we will be sharing with you very soon. So this was an A5 invitation which folded out, and so this is the inside. So there's Paris, so there's some of your people and places. I know you did York and so on as well, but this is the Parisian pictures. And we asked you if you would like to put this up for charity, and so the Supper Club Collective, we thought we'd maybe sell a few, and we've sold hundreds. And
amazing, it's brilliant.
So this has been extraordinary, and we are continuing to sell them. And it's just such a joyful thing. We'll hopefully be doing a similar Angie Lewin version shortly. My dog has just joined me. And if we just move on to the next slide, please. Well, we're obviously rattling to the end. I thought we'd have lots of time, and we haven't.
That's such a beautiful, that's such a nice, that's the first time I've seen this. It's so gorgeous. I love it.
Well, you are going to come up to see Angie's exhibition, Emily.
I am, yes.
Because I don't have another date for an exhibition because you've just had one. I know that you're incredibly busy with book illustration and so on, but I'm hoping that once you see what Angie's done, no pressure on Angie.
I'll see Angie and I'll just.
I think Angie's exhibition in the gallery is going to serve as quite a challenge, and I hope you take the challenge, because I would love for you to have.
I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to be incredible. I've seen some of these on Instagram, and very excited about it. So yeah, it'll be amazing.
It's very exciting, and I think we end on the Modern Masters Women, which was designed by Emily. You have both been two of our Modern Masters. Been so grateful to you for being part of this exhibition, and so grateful for your time this afternoon. I thought we would have lots of time to just like come back and have a look through your studios and so on. But that is our time up, and I can't believe that this is our last Meet the Artist for part of our Modern Masters Women programme.
No, it's been great, brilliant. I noticed there are a few questions coming up on the bottom, but if there's any in particular people wanted to email, whatever, within reason. I don't have limited time, but if there's any kind of pressing things, then
we've got one. Do you have any favorite art materials or colors you couldn't live without? So Angie, what could you not live without?
Well, I think in terms of the watercolors, and I never know how you say it. I say schminke watercolors, but I'm not sure if that's how you say it. Do you have those, Emily? The schminke?
At the moment I've been using a set of Japanese ones, which are not as they're probably not quite as good, but I love them because they're very big pans and they have a lot of colors in them. So I've been quite enjoying those. But yeah, I mean, the schminke ones are incredible.
And I use them in tubes. Well, as my work's got more colourful, definitely using a lot stronger colours. I'm using tubes. The colour that I use a lot of is neutral tint, which is this amazing sort of purplish colour, which on its own is amazing, but you add it to sort of ultramarines and umber, and it's just the most beautiful colour. So I use that. I don't think I could ever be without that colour. And also Faber-Castell artist pens, the Indian ink ones. I just use those for so much. They're just brilliant for drawing in sketchbooks, on lino, for writing with. They're just great. I feel like I'm a rep for the company, but they're absolutely brilliant. So I suppose those are my favourite things, really.
Emily, what could you?
I would say, for me, I would say that there's a type of ink called Rora's drawing inks, and you can get them from like Great Art and Jackson's Art Supplies and Amazon probably. And they're dip pen inks, but they come in these beautiful bottles. And actually, just wait one sec, I can get one.
They are lovely, actually. I use those as well. They've just got really strong colours.
Very beaten up one. You can barely see it, but they're ones that you use the dip pen. But what's great about them is you can draw with them and paint with them, and you can mix them like paint. But they're completely colour fast, so you can then work over the top of them with watercolour washes and things. And they're brilliant for drawing detail. Like you can do the detail on a transferware cup or something if you want to do them in a colour as different from black, which is usually what you have to use if you want colour fast ink. And they don't clog or anything, so they're brilliant for drawing. And then just pencils generally. I use a lot of pencils.
Emily, I would like you to show everyone your hands before we go.
Oh no.
Your hard-working hands. Sorry, I just remembered. I just saw one a second ago. See, that's a hard-working artist with their inky hands.
Yeah, sorry.
Amazing. Well, Emily from Yorkshire, Angie from Speyside, and me from sunny Berwickshire, thank you so much for being our Meet the Artist. I'll see you very, very soon. And thank you all very much for coming today.